I was there the day they tried to hang her. May 17th, 1873. The kind of morning where he'd already pressed down on your collar before the sun cleared the ridge. Dust hung in the air like guilt, thick and unmoving. Her name was Eleanor Ashford, 24 years old, widow of Thomas Ashford, the banker's son who died screaming in his bed 3 months prior. Black tongue, they said. Foam at the mouth, the kind of death that makes men whisper and women cross themselves. I stood at the base of the scaffold, Bible in hand, ready to offer her final prayer. My duty as the town preacher. My privilege, I believe, then to guide even the damned toward some semblance of grace before the rope took them. She wore no hood. That was the first thing that unsettled me. Most condemned asked for darkness in their final moments, but Eleanor stood in the full glare of noon, her clear throat-dark hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes scanning the crowd with neither fear nor defiance, just watching like she was memorizing faces. Sheriff Hollis read the charges. Witchcraft, murder by poison, conspiracy with dark forces. The crowd murmured its agreement, a low growl of sanctioned hatred. I saw Mrs. Crenshaw clutch her daughter closer. Saw old Martin spit into the dirt. Eleanor held her child against her chest. A boy no more than 18 months with her dark eyes in his father's gentle mouth. The child didn't cry. That unsettled me too. Children always cried at hangings. The noise, the fear, the tension crackling through the air like lightning before a storm. But this boy simply pressed his face into his mother's shoulder and was still. Any last words? Hollis asked, more from tradition than genuine interest. Eleanor's voice when it came was quiet, not weak, quiet. There's a difference. I love my husband, she said. I tried to save him, that's all. The crowd laughed. Not all of them, but enough to make it ugly. She admits it. Someone shouted, tried to save him with devil's work. I opened my Bible to Psalm 23, preparing to read when I heard it. The slow, deliberate sound of boot steels on wood. Not hurried, not hesitant, just inevitable. A man walked through the crowd, tall, lean, wearing a coat too heavy for the weather and a hat that shadowed most of his face. He moved like water, finding its level, and people stepped aside without quite knowing why. His hands hung loose at his sides, no gun visible, but you felt the threat of him like you feel a rattlesnake in tall grass. He stopped at the base of the scaffold, looked up at Eleanor, then at Hollis. "This woman is coming with me," he said. His voice carried no challenge, no aggression. It was a simple statement of fact, like saying rain falls down or stones are hard. Hollis's hand went to his gun. "The hell she is. This is legal town business, you stranger. You got know I'm making it my business." The stranger's eyes, when they finally lifted to meet Hollis's, were gray as winter sky, empty of everything except certainty. Hollis was not a coward. He'd faced down claim jumpers and cattle rustlers and once famously 3 Comanche raiders with nothing but a knife and a bad temper. But something in that gray gaze made him hesitate. "You calling me a liar?" the stranger asked, still in that same flat tone, "calling this whole town wrong? I'm saying she's mine now. Anyone who disagrees can state their case. No one spoke. I should have. God forgive me. I should have stepped forward and proclaimed the righteousness of law, of evidence, of justice served in daylight before witnesses. But I didn't, because something in his voice made me uncertain, and I'd built my entire life on certainty." The stranger walked up the scaffold steps. Eleanor's eyes tracked him, wide now, confused. He reached her and gently, with a care that shocked me, took the boy from her arms. The child went without protest, small hands gripping the stranger's collar. Then he unknotted the rope from around Eleanor's neck. "You got a horse?" he asked her. She shook her head. "You do now." He led her down the steps, child in one arm, her hand in his other. The crowd parted like Scripture says the Red Sea did, and for the same reason. Because sometimes you witness something bigger than your understanding, and all you can do is make room for it. At the edge of the square he stopped, turned back to face us all. His eyes found mine, held them. "Any man wants to follow," he said. "I'll be waiting." Then they were gone, dust settling where they'd stood, the rope swaying empty in the wind. I told myself in the days that followed that justice would find them, that God's judgment doesn't bend for quiet men with gray eyes and conviction. I preached about witchcraft on Sunday, about the devil's cunning, about how evil wears appealing masks, but I didn't ride after them. Neither did Hollis, though he talked loud about it in the saloon. 3 months passed, then 6, then a year. Word came back slow and strange as smoke signals. A homestead 20 miles west near the canyon country where water ran cold even in August. A woman who knew herbs, who could set bones, deliver bobbies, stop bleeding with pressure and prayer, who asked for no payment but took what was offered. She's still a witch, Mrs. Crenshaw insisted, just hiding it better. But when Mrs. Crenshaw's youngest came down with fever that winter and Doc Brennan said there was nothing to be done, she rode those 20 m in a snowstorm. Came back 2 days later with her son pale but breathing. She never said what happened, but she stopped calling Eleanor a witch. Others followed. A rancher whose leg was crushed by a falling horse. A girl with a growth on her neck that Doc said would kill her. A boy who'd swallowed lye. One by one they went west to the canyon country, and one by one they came back whole. And every time they spoke of the quiet man who never smiled, who worked the land from dawn till dusk, who stood between Eleanor and any threat with the patience of stone and the certainty of steel. I visited once, told myself it was pastoral duty, told myself I needed to see with my own eyes whether evil had truly taken root or whether I'd been wrong. The homestead was small but tended with care. Fences straight, garden flourishing despite the rocky soil. Chickens scattered as I rode up, and a dog barked once, then settled. Eleanor came to the door, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked older, though only 2 years had passed, or perhaps she simply looked her age now, no longer carrying the weight of a town's hatred. "Reverend," she said, not warmly but not coldly either. "Can I help you?" I dismounted, hat in hand. "I came to see if you were well." "We're well." The stranger appeared from the barn, hammer in hand, saw me, nodded once but didn't approach. Just stood there 30 yards off, waiting. "Your husband," I said to Eleanor. "Thomas, I've been thinking about his death." She was quiet a long moment. Then she invited me in for coffee. We sat at a rough-hewn table. The boy played on the floor with carved wooden animals, the stranger's work, I guessed. Thomas had a sickness, Eleanor said, hands wrapped around her cup. Doc Brennan knew, called it a growth in the blood, said it would kill him slow or fast, but it would kill him. Thomas asked me not to tell anyone, didn't want pity. Didn't want his father to know his only son was dying. "The black tongue," I said. "The foam, the medicine I gave him to ease the pain." Doc Brennan provided it. Check his records if you don't believe me. I did believe her. That was the worst part. Sitting there in her small, clean kitchen, watching her son play, seeing the tired lines around her eyes, I believed her completely. "Why didn't you say so?" I asked, "at the trial? Would you have listened?" The question hung between us like smoke. "The truth doesn't matter much," she continued, "when people need someone to blame. Thomas died young, beloved, with a wife people thought too pretty and too strange. They needed a reason that made sense. Witchcraft made sense to them. I looked down at my coffee, seeing my reflection dark and distorted in its surface. "I'm sorry," I said. Eleanor didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was soft but final. "Sorry doesn't unknot a rope, Reverend. Sorry doesn't give my son back the father he'll never remember, but I appreciate the word nonetheless." I left soon after. The stranger watched me go, still standing by the barn, hammer in hand. He never spoke. Didn't need to. Years passed. The homestead prospered. Eleanor became known not as a witch, but as a healer. The stranger, whose name I learned was Caleb, became known as a man who kept his word and his silence in equal measure. They married quietly with no ceremony. Simply rode to the county seat, signed the papers, rode home. I heard about it secondhand. Weeks later, I continued my ministry, preached about grace and forgiveness, about judging not lest ye be judged. The congregation nodded and agreed and went on judging anyway, as people do. But I was changed. Some fundamental certainty had cracked in me that day on the scaffold, and the crack never fully healed. 10 years after the hanging that never was, I fell ill. The same sickness that took Thomas Ashford, according to Doc Brennan. Growth in the blood, nothing to be done. I should have been afraid. A preacher who'd spent his life proclaiming certainty about the afterlife should face death with confidence. But I was terrified. Not of hell, but of all the times I'd been so sure, so righteous, so wrong. Eleanor came. I didn't ask her to. She simply arrived one morning carrying Clear's throat. Her medicine bag and my housekeeper let her in. She sat beside my bed mixing herbs I didn't recognize, speaking in a voice I barely remembered. "This won't cure you," she said, "but it will ease the pain. Let you think clearly in whatever time remains." "Why?" I managed to ask, "after what I did to you." "You didn't tie the rope, Reverend, you just didn't cut it." She paused, measuring powder into a cup. "That's different. Not better, but different. I should have spoken," I said. "I should have defended you." Yes. The simple agreement hurt more than any condemnation could have. She gave me the medicine. It worked as she promised. The pain receded to something bearable and my mind cleared like fog lifting from a valley. "The man who took you," I said. "Caleb, did you know him before?" Eleanor smiled. The first time I'd ever seen her smile. Never met him before that day. He was riding through town, stopped for water at the well, saw the scaffold being built, asked what it was for. Someone told him they were hanging a witch, and he just decided. He told me later, she said, that his sister was hanged for witchcraft when he was 16. Different town, same hatred. He was too young then to stop it, but he promised himself he'd never be too young again. She finished preparing the medicine and set it on the table beside my bed. "You'll want to take this twice daily. It will last you through to the end, however long that is." "Thank you," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my failing body. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Reverend, the day they tried to hang me, you had your Bible open. Psalm 23. I remember because my mother used to sing it to me. I did. Did you believe it? The valley of the shadow of death and fearing no evil." I looked at her. This woman I'd allowed to be condemned who now stood in my doorway offering mercy I didn't deserve. I believe it now. I said I died 3 months later. Peacefully, they tell me, though I don't remember the end. I remember Eleanor's medicine. I remember the taste of forgiveness, bitter and necessary. I remember thinking in those last clear moments about certainty, how it's the luxury of people who have never been wrong about something that mattered, how easy it is to condemn from a distance, how hard to offer grace up close. They buried me in the town cemetery under a stone that listed my years of service and my devotion to the gospel. Good words, true words in their way, but the truth I learned too late to matter was this. Sometimes the devils we're so sure we see are just people who frightened us by being different. And sometimes the angels we're waiting for arrive in dusty coats and gray eyes, saying nothing, doing everything. Eleanor and Caleb came to my funeral, stood at a distance, paid their respects, left quietly. Their son, grown tall by then, stood between them, healthy, loved, alive, because a stranger decided that right mattered more than easy. I'd like to think God forgave me for my failures that day on the scaffold, but I'm not sure forgiveness is what I needed. I needed to be wrong, to have my certainty shattered, to learn finally that grace is something you give. Not because people deserve it, but because you're human enough to know you might be next to need it. Eleanor taught me that. Caleb showed me that. And it only cost me everything I thought I knew, the valley of the shadow of death. I feared no evil there, but I should have feared my own righteousness.